The transport shuddered as it broke through the thin veil of blue ion clouds surrounding the HFY. Inside the hold, hundreds of humans sat shoulder to shoulder, their breaths shallow in the recycled air, their eyes darting nervously between the Dominion soldiers patrolling the aisles. No one spoke above a whisper. Fear had stripped them of sound. Captain Elias Ward kept his back straight against the cold steel wall. He was 37, old enough to remember Earth before it bent its knee to the Dominion, young enough to still feel the sharp sting of betrayal. He had been an engineer once, designing orbital habitats that circled Mars. Now he wore the rank patch the Dominion had stitched onto his uniform, a pale imitation of command, granted not out of respect but necessity. He was to lead these men and women into a war none of them had asked for. The Dominion officer overseeing the transport moved with the self-assured grace of a predator. Tall, with elongated limbs and skin that shimmered like oil under light, the alien radiated disdain. His translator device barked words in a harsh synthetic voice. "You will fight. You will bleed. Perhaps you will survive. The Dominion has no use for weakness." A miner seated beside Elias spat on the deck. The sound echoed too loudly in the silence. The officer paused, glaring, but moved on. Elias didn't scold the man. He understood. Every one of them had been forced here. Every one of them had left behind homes, families, lives, because the Dominion had decreed humanity's debt must be paid in blood. When the transport landed, the heat struck them first. The HFY was not a world but a fractured asteroid belt, a graveyard of shattered moons and drifting rocks. The staging ground was carved into one such fragment, a fortress of black metal bristling with cannons. Dominion banners hung like warnings from its spires. "Auxiliaries," the officer barked. "You are assigned to the forward line. Sector Theta 7. You will engage the Dravari horde immediately." Murmurs rippled through the humans. Theta 7 was infamous even in whispers. Suicide posts. Elias clenched his jaw. They were being thrown into a meat grinder. The march to the trenches was silent save for the clank of boots and the hiss of atmosphere regulators. The Dominion had provided little in the way of equipment, mismatched rifles, crude armor, and ration packs barely fit for consumption. Elias kept pace with his soldiers, speaking only when the silence threatened to crush them. "Keep your heads down. Watch each other's backs. Don't wait for orders from them. We survive by surviving together." A young woman glanced at him, her eyes wide. "And if we don't?" Elias met her gaze. "Then we make them remember how hard we fought." The forward line was chaos. Dominion soldiers barely spared the humans a glance before herding them into shallow trenches facing a vast field of jagged rock. Beyond that horizon, the enemy waited. The Dravari horde, hulking insected creatures with armor like obsidian and claws sharp enough to tear through steel. The Dominion had fought them for centuries, either side gaining ground. Humans were to be the latest expendables. The attack began without warning. The ground shook as Dravari's ships disgorged swarms onto the field. The sky turned red with tracer fire and plasma bolts. The humans froze for an instant, caught between terror and disbelief. Elias snapped them back. "Rifles up! Fire on my mark!" The first wave hit like a storm. Dravari charged with screeching battle cries, their forms shimmering in the haze. Humans fired in ragged bursts, bullets sparking off alien carapaces. Panic spread as creatures slammed into the trench, tearing through men and women like paper. Elias grabbed a discarded Dominion plasma grenade, yanked the pin, and hurled it into the largest cluster. The explosion carved a brief reprieve. Smoke filled the air. He shouted above the roar. "Use the rocks! Break their lines!" The miners and farmers under his command understood instinctively. They shifted, drawing the Dravari into narrow crevices where their bulk became a weakness. They used scavenged tools, explosives meant for excavation, even jagged stone shards as weapons. The line bent, threatened to break, but held. Hours passed like minutes. Blood soaked the dirt, and the air burned with ozone. Elias fought side by side with his soldiers, his rifle overheating, his arms trembling. Yet with every desperate strike, the humans adapted. They learned the rhythm of the Dravari's charges, exploited the gaps in their armor, turned desperation into innovation. By dusk, the field was littered with the dead, human and Dravari alike. Against all odds, Theta 7 had not fallen. The Dominion reinforcements arrived only when the last Dravari corpses twitched in the dust. The Dominion officer who had delivered them here surveyed the carnage with narrowed eyes. Unexpected, the translator said flatly. Statistical models predicted total collapse within 1 hour. Elias stood among the wounded, his uniform torn, his face streaked with grime. He met the officer's gaze without flinching. We're not statistics. The officer sneered, turning away. To him, survival meant nothing. It only meant more battles, more chances to bleed humanity dry. Later, when night cloaked the trenches, Elias sat with what remained of his unit. They huddled close, sharing the last of their rations, silent except for the crackle of failing equipment. Someone whispered, "They don't expect us to live." Elias answered quietly, so only his nearest soldiers could hear. "Then let's keep disappointing them." Above, the stars burned cold. Somewhere out there, High Strategist Veyrak Thal received the report of human survival. He dismissed it with a wave of his clawed hand. Primitive luck, nothing more. Humans would die soon enough. But Elias Ward knew better. Humanity had been dragged into a war it never wanted. Now that it had tasted the fire, it would never go quietly. The infirmary stank of burnt metal and blood. Makeshift cots lined the narrow chamber, each occupied by a human soldier wrapped in bandages the Dominion had rationed as if fabric were gold. The Dominion medics barely touched them, focusing instead on their own wounded. Humans had to stitch their own, tend their own, or die quietly in the corner. Elias Ward stood among his battered soldiers, exhaustion carving deep lines across his face. He refused the cot offered to him. Others needed it more. Around him, miners, farmers, and conscripts whispered in low voices, their anger rising like heat from the floor. They had survived Theta 7, yet their reward was contempt. "They call us auxiliaries," muttered a mechanic with one arm in a sling. "More like fodder. We bleed, they sneer, then they send us back in. They want us gone," said another. "But if we keep living, we ruin their plans." Elias crouched, his voice steady but sharp enough to cut through despair. "Then that's exactly what we'll do, ruin their plans. Every time they send us to die, we'll come back standing. That's how we win." The words didn't erase the pain, but they gave it direction. His unit clung to that fire. The next day, Dominion officers herded the humans into a training yard. It was more a pit than a field, surrounded by towering walls. Alien overseers observed from platforms above, their faces twisted in amusement. They barked instructions through translators, ordering humans to perform drills designed for soldiers with twice their strength and endurance. Elias joined the ranks, refusing to stand apart. He moved through the drills with the rest, correcting stances, showing them how to use weight and speed instead of brute strength. When the Dominion forced them to lift equipment too heavy for human muscles, Elias adapted the order. He broke the task into shifts, pairs trading loads, small efficiencies the overseers dismissed as weakness. To the humans, it became survival. At night, Elias pushed the training further. Away from alien eyes, in the dim corners of the trench networks, he taught them the tricks of improvisation. How to set trip wires from stripped cables, how to use ration cans as makeshift grenades, how to study the terrain and make it an ally. They learned to ambush, to strike fast and vanish before the enemy regrouped. "Guerrilla," Elias explained, sketching crude diagrams in the dirt. "We can't match their numbers or their armor. But we don't need to. We strike where they don't look, cut them where they're soft, and fade back before they know what happened." The soldiers listened with a hunger no Dominion could measure. These weren't lessons in survival anymore. They were lessons in defiance. The second test came sooner than expected. Orders dragged the humans to another front line, Sector Delta 9. A ravine choked with jagged spires, perfect for ambushes but just as perfect for slaughter. The Dominion's prediction was the same as before. The humans would hold for minutes, then break. Elias knew better. Form squads, he told his unit as they marched into position. Don't wait for me. Watch each other. You know what to do. The attack was a storm of screeches and plasma. Dravari poured into the ravine, claws slicing through the smoke. Dominion troops fired from the cliffs above but didn't descend. The humans were left to choke on the blood-soaked ground. Elias gave the signal. His squad scattered, moving like shadows through the stone formations. Trip wires snapped, detonating hidden charges. Rocks collapsed, crushing Dravari beneath their weight. In the chaos, humans struck from angles no Dominion plan accounted for. They weren't a wall to be broken, they were teeth, cutting from every side. The Dravari reeled. For the first time, the horde hesitated, uncertain. The humans pressed harder, turning the terrain itself into a weapon. The battle didn't end in victory. The Dominion never gave them the support to make that possible, but it ended in survival. Against the odds, the line held. When the smoke cleared, Dominion officers descended, furious. You were ordered to hold the trench, not scatter like insects. One hissed to a translator. We held, Elias replied coldly. Your trench is intact. So are most of my soldiers. The officer's glare said more than words. Survival was not supposed to be possible. High strategist Veyrak Thal received the reports in his war chamber. Holograms cast pale light across his angular features as he studied the numbers. Human units had not only survived, they had inflicted damage disproportionate to their numbers. Statistical anomalies, murmured one of his aides. No, Veyrak said, his voice low, calculated. Patterns. They adapt too quickly. They think like predators, not soldiers. Push them harder. Strip them thinner. Break them before others notice. Orders spread like poison. Humans were thrown into more impossible positions, missions calculated to erase them. But the Dominion miscalculated. Every mission was bloodier, yet with each, the humans sharpened. The weak died, but the survivors became something more dangerous, soldiers who understood both desperation and cunning. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Elias's unit was sent to reinforce a collapsing flank. Dominion command had already ridden the sector off, expecting the humans to delay the horde long enough for retreat. When the Dravari struck, they struck with overwhelming force. Screams tore the night as humans fell one after another. Elias fought like a man possessed, rifle overheating, knife flashing when his ammunition ran dry. He pulled comrades from collapsing barricades, shouted orders through the din, refused to let the line collapse. But by dawn, half his unit was gone. Corpses littered the trench, and the survivors were too few to bury them all. Elias stormed into the Dominion command post, grime streaked across his face, blood soaking his uniform. The alien officers glanced up lazily as if swatting at a fly. You sent us to die, Elias growled. The senior officer raised one brow ridge. That was the purpose of your assignment. They were my people. His voice shook with fury. Not tools. Not numbers. People. The officer sneered. You are auxiliaries. You exist to absorb the cost of war. Be grateful we allow you to serve. The words snapped whatever restraint Elias had left. He stepped forward until guards blocked his path, weapons raised. His voice dropped to a dangerous calm. You think we'll keep dying for you forever? You think we'll let you grind us into dust? No. Not anymore. The officer laughed, dismissive. You are ours until you die. Nothing more. Elias didn't reply. He turned on his heel and left, the laughter echoing behind him. But in his silence, a seed had taken root. That night, among the tattered remnants of his unit, Elias spoke quietly. They'll never see us as anything but expendable. If we stay their pawns, we'll vanish. But if we fight for ourselves... He paused, letting the words sink in. We'll show them what humanity really is. The soldiers looked at him with eyes hollowed by loss but lit with something fierce. Not hope, not yet, but defiance. The third deployment came at dawn, though time meant little in the perpetual twilight of the Ashra Verge. Elias Ward's soldiers moved in silence, weapons slung, eyes hollow from weeks of attrition. They had fought, bled, endured, and now the Dominion demanded more. The orders were clear: reinforce the Dominion line during a full Dravari assault, hold until collapse, and die buying time. Elias read between the lines. They weren't expected to return. As they trudged toward the staging ground, he stopped. "Listen," he said, voice low but cutting through the shuffle of boots. "This isn't about them anymore. They'll never see us as more than fodder. But today, we don't fight for them. We fight for us. For everyone back home who never asked for this war." The words sparked something buried deep, something raw. Heads lifted, backs straightened. For the first time, they weren't walking to their deaths. They were walking to claim their right to live. The battlefield stretched like a scar across the asteroid's fractured surface. Dominion artillery pounded the horizon, trying to slow the Dravari advance. Jagged spires glowed under weapons fire, casting shadows that twisted like claws. Dominion officers waved Elias and his soldiers forward, shouting commands through translators. Elias ignored them. He had his own plan. "Split squads," he ordered. "Take cover in the ridges. Don't follow their formation. Wait for my signal." The soldiers obeyed without hesitation. They weren't Dominion pawns anymore. They were his. The Dravari came in waves, towers of chitin and fury, claws flashing in the haze. Dominion forces opened fire in disciplined volleys, their rigid tactics faltering as the horde adapted. Within minutes, sections of the line buckled. Elias raised his hand, then dropped it. "Now!" The humans struck like knives. Explosives hidden in the rocks detonated, ripping apart the horde's front ranks. Squads emerged from shadows, rifles hammering, knives flashing in brutal close quarters. The Dravari reeled, unprepared for enemies who refused to fight like soldiers. "Press them!" Elias shouted, his own rifle barking until the barrel glowed. "Don't give them time to think!" His soldiers moved with ferocity born of desperation, each man and woman fighting for survival, not orders. They improvised constantly. Rifles turned into spears when ammunition ran dry, Dominion grenades rewired into traps, broken armor scavenged mid-battle. Every strike was unorthodox, unpredictable, human. From the command spire above, high strategist Veyrak Thal watched the chaos unfold. His features twisted in disbelief as reports streamed in. "The auxiliaries are breaking formation," an aide stammered. "They should have collapsed," another said. "Instead, they're holding." Veyrak's claws clenched. "They're not holding. They're mutinying. Crush them. Turn every cannon on their position." Orders cascaded through the Dominion ranks, but the damage was done. Humans had torn a hole in the Dravari offensive, forcing the horde to divert. Dominion commanders tried to exploit it, but their rigid strategies stumbled where human improvisation thrived. On the ground, Elias ducked behind a shattered barricade as plasma scorched the stone beside him. His comm crackled with frantic voices. "Captain? The Dominion's targeting us too." "Expect it," Elias cut in. "Doesn't matter. Keep pushing. We finish this on our terms." He leapt from cover, leading a charge straight into a cluster of Dravari warriors. His blade tore through carapace, his soldiers swarming behind him. It was savage, primal, but effective. The horde broke, retreating into the haze. The humans didn't cheer. They were too tired, too aware this wasn't victory. But it was survival, and survival was defiance. Hours later, the battlefield lay quiet, littered with corpses and smoldering wreckage. Dominion officers descended, weapons raised, intending to reassert control. Elias stood before them, rifle at his side, gaze unwavering. His soldiers formed around him, ragged but unyielding. "You will return to your posts," a Dominion commander ordered through his translator. "You belong to the Dominion until your usefulness ends." Elias's reply was calm, steady. "Not anymore." The Dominion sneered, but hesitation flickered in their eyes. Around them, other human units, inspired by whispers of rebellion, were already breaking away, abandoning their alien overseers to gather around Elias's survivors. The spark had caught flame. Veyrak arrived hours later, his personal guard clearing a path through the wreckage. He studied Elias with cold, calculating eyes. "You presume much," the strategist said, his translator echoing his contempt. "Without us, you would still be crawling in the dirt of your homeworld." Elias stepped forward. The weight of every battle, every loss, sharpened his words into steel. "You dragged us into your war, used us as shields, fed us to your enemies. And still we stand. You should have left us in the dirt, Veyrak. Because now you'll never forget us." For the first time, silence fell across the Dominion ranks. The days that followed blurred into something new. Humans began seizing Dominion outposts, commandeering weapons, and building their own networks within the war front. They no longer waited for orders. They made their own. Word spread across the verge. Humans were not expendable auxiliaries anymore. They were a force. The Dravari, once eager to tear through human lines, began to hesitate. They had fought countless species, but none like this. None who turned every loss into a weapon, none who fought with such reckless cunning. Elias stood at the heart of it all, not as a Dominion officer, not as a pawn, but as a commander of humans who refused to die on command. He knew the war was far from over. The Dominion and Dravari would regroup, plot, and strike again. But something had shifted, something irreversible. Humanity had bled for survival. Now it fought for its own future. That night, under the cold starlight, Elias gathered his soldiers. He looked at the scarred faces, the eyes hardened by fire, and spoke the words none of them would forget. "They thought we were tools to be used and discarded. But we've shown them the truth. We are not theirs to command. We are not pawns in their war. We are the storm they never saw coming." The soldiers didn't cheer, they didn't need to. Their silence was louder than any roar, a vow carved in blood and steel. High strategist Veyrak would remember. The Dominion would remember. The Dravari would remember. The galaxy had learned its lesson: never underestimate humanity.